It's the most wonderful time of the year. No, not the holiday you're thinking of, training camp, because that means we're just a few weeks away from the start of the new NHL season. And the Devils took the sheet of ice, and Fitzgerald and Keefe spoke to the media. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Chalky, play announcer, Devils Drive Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Can you feel it in the air? Check the watches, everybody, because training camp is finally here, which means we are inching closer to the Devils' opening game in Prague against the Buffalo Sabres. You can just hear the skates hit the sheet of ice. You can hear the coaches blow their whistles. You can hear the beat and bang on the boards. You can hear the players talking amongst one another, the loudness of it all. I'm getting excited just talking about it. We are in late September. Hockey season is almost here, and we're just a few days away from the start of preseason. A lot of players spoke to the media, and I was looking on the New Jersey Devils YouTube page, and it looked like they had a media availability last for about 40 or so minutes, which in real time would be a little more than an hour. A lot of players took the time to express their thoughts on this Devils team and also just talk about their first impressions from training camp. But we're not going to hear from the players in today's episode. We're going to break down the media availability from head coach Sheldon Keefe and general manager Tom Fitzgerald. And Fitzy had a funny soundbite during one of his answers, courtesy of a question from Bill Spalding, play-by-play announcer for the Devils, also appeared on this show a few days ago. But before we get to the press conference, let's go over some housekeeping for the Devils. First and foremost, Dawson Mercer. Fitzgerald gave us some good news. He says they're inching closer to a deal and that he and his agent are still in deep talks, but he feels like it's heading in a good direction. But for the time being, Dawson Mercer still is not on the training camp roster. Obviously, once he signs on the dotted line, he will join the team. But for right now, Kevin Labanc was on the line with Tomas Tatar and Nico Hischier. I'm going to assume that was Dawson Mercer's spot because, as we all know, a couple years ago during the Devils' historic season, Dawson Mercer was on the same line as Tomas Tatar and Nico Hischier, and those three saw great success, especially Tomas Tatar, because I think he was a surprise for a lot of people. And speaking of Tomas Tatar, I saw some of the pictures on social media, him being front and center during the huddles. And he also spoke to the media and said that he was really excited to be back with the Devils organization. And I'm actually fond with Tatar. I said that had the Devils not gotten Tyler Toffoli, I would have been open with the Devils re-signing him to a 1 or a 2-year extension 100%. Because like I said, one of the more underrated assets during that historic run by the Devils during the 2022-2023 season. And he also had a plus minus well over plus 40. But like I said, Kevin Labanc has taken the spot of Dawson Mercer being sort of a filler piece. And Timo Meier actually seemed excited to have Labanc join the roster, albeit, like I said in the previous episode, it is a PTO contract. We'll see what happens. My expectations aren't that high, but remember, the reason why Labanc had to sign a 1-year, $1 million extension with the Sharks a few years ago is because Timo Meier and Erik Karlsson had to get new contracts, and the Sharks front office prioritized those two players over Labanc. If you want to hear my full thoughts on it, check out yesterday's episode. But the fact that we got some positive news regarding Dawson Mercer, I think that's a step in the right direction. He needs to be back on this roster ASAP for just a couple more seasons. This is excruciating, it's frustrating, and exhausting. All right. The injury report, courtesy of Daniel Moya of the Hockey Writers. He will appear on tomorrow's episode. Here's what the Devils are dealing with. Luke Hughes, shoulder, out 5 to 7 more weeks. Brett Pesce, surgery recovery, week to week. Eric Haula, unfortunately, he caught some sort of bug, but he is coming back today when this episode goes live. Josh Philman, upper body, week to week. And the biggest news of them all, Shimo Nemitz is clear to play because, as we all know, during an Olympic qualifier game, he took a nasty hit, and a lot of people were holding their breath. Would Nemitz return in time for training camp? Lo and behold, here he is, ready for year 2 in the NHL. The Devils are already down Luke Hughes. I'm sure a lot of people did not want to see Nemitz also go down for an extended period of time. And I said it in a recent episode that I was going to assume best case scenario that Nemitz would be good to go. I didn't make any final assessment, but people were a little concerned that the Devils weren't releasing anything. But for me, I stayed calm about the matter. And some people on the Devils discourse were surprised that Pesce was recovering from season-ending surgery. And honestly, I'm a little perplexed by it because did you guys know that Pesce only played in 2 playoff games for the Hurricanes this past season? Why is that? Because he was injured. And I just thought everyone knew about that. And I think I did discuss it when the Devils initially signed him. And call me crazy, just I'm trying to recall from the top of my head. I'm pretty sure Pesce talked about it during his first media availability for the Devils. But for right now, Pesce is week to week. And I'm saying, oh, look, if he had season-ending surgery a few months ago and he's recovering from that, take your time. The Devils can't afford to have one of their top defensemen go out for an extended period of time. Case in point with Dougie Hamilton, which, by the way, nice to see Dougie Hamilton back on the sheet of ice after missing 75% of the season. Training camp left a lot of positivity in the air for the players, Tom Fitzgerald, Sheldon Keefe, and during his press conference, Sheldon Keefe talked about his expectations, his impressions, and also his vision with this team. Take a listen.
It's been a long time coming, working towards the opening of camp. Your first impressions of having everyone on the ice in those groups that you did and the expectations you feel that you're setting for this group going forward.
Well, I was impressed with the group today. I mean, I've been impressed in the lead up. I think it started with just how many guys came in here early, got their work in. They had been told well in advance to expect that we were not going to ease into this thing. That they've got to come prepared, and I think they put in good work both before they arrived here, and we've had a lot of guys in skating and getting prepared for today. So I thought they worked real hard. I thought they gave us everything that they had, which is what you're asking for. We're trying to set the tone in that sense. So I was really happy with the first day, and I'm trying to learn about all the individuals. It's one thing to talk to them in the off season, watch them on video, but to see them on the ice and see how they're handling some of these demanding situations that we put them in here today, I was impressed. And the energy is good, and I think the additions that we brought into the mix here as well this season, I was really happy with what they brought, despite it being their first day too.
One of the things, having talked to a few of the guys this morning, is they say you have a really clear vision and you're very good at communicating what that vision is to them. What is a bit of that vision that you're trying to establish here?
Well, there's 2 things. I mean, the first is, a vision of where we want to go as a team, which is to be a group that builds something that's sustainable to where we can compete in our division, in the playoffs, and ultimately competing for the Stanley Cup is where we want to get to. So we want to build something sustainable there. So that's our vision, to be that, something where we're confident. We know exactly who we are and how how we can get to where we want to get to, and the other piece is what we're going to look like, the vision for how we're going to play, and the habits and things that we need from our group. We made that really clear for them. We started the practice today with a skating drill. To me, is a sprinting drill, and that's a reflection of the fact that we need our group to sprint. We need our group skating. We need our group to be relentless. We need great effort, and we need to be able to do that also when it's difficult and it's hard and you're not feeling great, and we need to be able to push through that. So we led with that here today. That's been a bit of a theme of my camps that I've run in the past. I wanted to bring that here today as well.
I recently collaborated on an episode with Locked On Flyers, Locked On Blue Jackets, Locked On Penguins. Basically, we were previewing our respective teams heading into the new year. It was a roundtable for teams that had missed the playoffs in their respective division, and the Devils, unfortunately, were included in it because, yes, the Devils did miss the playoffs this past season, but they're projected to be much better. But somebody asked me during the recording, which will go live on September 30th, what happens if the Devils miss the playoffs this upcoming season? And honestly, I didn't know how to answer it, because it's just like, I have high hopes for this Devils team, but that is a good question. What happens if the Devils miss the playoffs this year? I'm not trying to sound pessimistic or anything, but that's a legit question, because a lot of people are projecting for the Devils to have 100 plus points. A lot of people are projecting for them to go further in the playoffs than they did a few seasons ago. They filled all the issues that were necessary to fill, including physicality, more depth, a goalie. I guess you could say they got an upgrade when it came to coaching. But if this Devils team misses the playoffs, I don't know what they're going to do, but it depends on the circumstance. So if it's similar to last year where they just dealt with a bunch of injuries, there's nothing really you can do. But if they're healthy for the most part and they just don't meet expectations, there's going to be some serious conversations that might need to be had. I'm just going to keep it real. I'm not a psychic or anything, but for Sheldon Keefe and this year's Devil squad, it is playoffs or bust. I said that earlier in the summer, and my sentiment does not change. The meat and potatoes for the Devils this season is to get back to the playoffs. And if they make it past the first round, if they make a deep playoff push, or hell, even if they win the Stanley Cup, that's just gravy. And people are saying like, oh, Sheldon Keefe, he's only going to get to the playoffs and then the Devils will get bounced down in the first round. That's an improvement from last year. I'm just going to keep it a buck with you. But I like Sheldon Keefe's answers. This team is far too talented to be in the position that they were last year. And if they're fully healthy, I have a lot of expectations for this unit moving forward. And people talked about how Sheldon Keefe had to deal with a lot of pressure in Toronto, which I do agree with. It's the mecca of hockey. But make no mistake, there's still some pressure here in New Jersey because this team needs to get back to the playoffs. And you can't really use the excuse anymore saying like, oh, their core four is relatively young. They'll learn and they'll grow. No. Players like Nico Hischier are starting to get up there in terms of NHL experience. He's entering year 8. You can no longer consider Nico a young buck in the league. He's now a veteran player. And we'll talk more about this team and how they're structured momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you about FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, I have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook, visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds, and please remember to always gamble responsibly. All right, let's talk about a funny soundbite from Tom Fitzgerald. And I got permission from the network to use this word as long as I don't overuse it. So I'm only going to use it twice. I'm going to say it once, and the soundbite is going to say it because I can't talk about it and not play the soundbite. That'd be ridiculous. But Tom Fitzgerald said when adding the players that he did, basically no dickheads on the roster. And that obviously sent shockwaves throughout the Devils discourse, and people are having a lot of fun with it. And here's what Tom Fitzgerald had to say during his press conference, and he's going to say the word as well. Take a listen.
Brought in this year size, physicality, veteran play, but a big takeaway the last couple of days talking with them is the big personalities and the positive attitudes that all those guys have as well. Was that also like a major factor in trying to add that to the room? What you wanted from those guys you brought in?
Yeah, that's a bonus, I would say. Not knowing any of them personally, it's tough for me to judge someone's personality, but I do know reputations around the league were extremely high with all these players, great team players, but most importantly, great people. People that care and are willing to do what they need to do and have had success within this league for a reason. So it doesn't change, from whether it's a hockey ops hiring or a coach or a trainer, players too. Just, you've heard me say this over, no dickheads. Just be a good person, and things will go well. Again, I'm a process-driven person, and let's not put the cart before the horse. As Sheldon has showed you today, like just starting off on the right foot and having a great day of practice and creating the right habits for a lot of these players that understand that winning habits are different than just going out and playing habits. And that's what I enjoyed watching today. Probably the day I never missed as much when I play so hard.
Oh, Fitzy, you just opened up a can of worms. I guarantee you, on opening night at the Prudential Center, you're going to get some guy on the corner selling some knockoff t-shirts saying, no D-heads for this Devils team. And it's going to basically latch on. And if the Devils, once again, do make it far in the playoffs and if they end up winning it, I think that's going to be their tagline. No D-heads. It's hilarious. But in all seriousness, people were wondering, like, what did he mean by that? And some people have jumped to conclusions, but I listened back on the question. I listened back to how he articulated it. Obviously, you just heard it. And here are some of my takeaways from it. When he's talking about no D-heads on this roster, I think he's thinking of like no idiots on this roster, because similar to what Mike Moriel of NHL.com said on this show back in June, this Devils team is starting to gain more experience in the NHL, and their core four in Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier, they have a decent amount of NHL experience under their belts. And while their window is not closing, it's not exactly at a starting point, if that makes sense. Like, you got to start seeing results ASAP, and you can't just be inconsistent. Like, you make the playoffs 1 year, you miss it for 2 years, then you make it again, and then you have a cup of coffee at the playoffs. No. This team needs to start building something right now, because you don't want to be put into a situation where the years fly by and all of a sudden you still have no Stanley Cup. These players, their contracts are starting to run out, and you might have to make some hard decisions. Thinking worst case scenario, I'm sorry if I sound pessimistic, but it's true. You don't want to let go of this golden opportunity, and you got to get right on it. I said it back in July that I think the Devils did really well when free agency hit. I know a lot of people were big on the two Bradys, Brady Tkachuk and Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, you name it. Anytime the Devils were linked to a big name player, people started to jump to conclusions. But I said, the Devils just need to fix their depth, and they need to add more veteran pieces, because I think one of the things that was lacking last year was leadership. And that's not a knock at the leadership from last year in Nico Hischier, the captain, Andre Palat, and Jack Hughes being the alternate captains. That's not a knock at them at all. But when the Devils brought on Eric Haula, Brendan Smith, and Andre Palat, you saw the locker room shift a little bit more, because the Devils added some guys who have way more experience than some of their other assets like Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes and have made runs to the Stanley Cup before. That is so vital to any locker room. And the Devils, once again, adding people like Stefan Nason, Brett Pesci, Brendan Dillon, Paul Cotter, who's won a Stanley Cup before, and also Jacob Markstrom. That's going to go a long way for New Jersey, and getting more veterans and just making yourself go up in terms of the average age in the NHL. That's going to help the Devils in more ways than one. And I think another thing that they struggled with was chemistry, because this Devils team was not healthy last year. Like I said in segment one, they couldn't get out of their own way in terms of injuries. Dougie Hamilton missing 75% of the season, Jack Hughes having to be sidelined for an extended period of time and ultimately having to settle on season-ending surgery. People are forgetting that Timo Meier also had surgery at the conclusion of the season. And I know I'm forgetting a few other people. Curtis Lazar, he didn't finish the season. Just to name a few, the Devils dealt with injury, and it was sometimes hard to build that chemistry. And I really hope that this time around, they can stay healthy so they can have that chemistry, because that's so vital. And the final thing I'll say is controversy. And I think this was something that a few people on the Devils discourse brought up. We know what happened with Cal Foote and Michael McLeod. If I'm just looking at it from a hockey perspective, Michael McLeod played a big role on the Devils, and he was having a career year. He was on pace to break the single season face-off win percentage in NHL history. And unfortunately, we know what happened. He and Cal Foote had to take their quote-unquote leave of absence, and their NHL dreams are pretty much over for their alleged crime. And that did put a big damper on the Devils in terms of playing abilities, but I'm just going to keep this light. I think it also maybe had an impact on them in the locker room. I can't really speak on that, but I'm just trying to put two and two together. It was not an easy thing to deal with for everyone. It was an awkward situation for people who were not involved in it. And I think that puts a big damper on you. And I know you try to go about your business and just say, it's just another day, it's another practice, it's another game, whatever the case might be. But at the end of the day, athletes are human and they do feel emotional pain like you and me. So I think that's what Fitzy meant by no D heads, which is we need leaders who are a no nonsense type of person, got to stay healthy, don't do anything stupid, and focus on hockey. Focus on your business, because if you do, good things will happen. Okay, to close out today's episode, here's what Sheldon Keefe had to say about the upcoming trip to Prague and how it can help the team. Take a listen.
Sheldon, what could this trip to Prague, how could it benefit maybe the team? There's a lot of new players here with the organization, new coach. How could going to Prague maybe benefit the team to kind of come together, galvanize everyone?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, there's the old adage of, getting on the road and being together. All of that has its benefits, and we'll certainly look to capitalize on that. Some long flights and time spent together away from family and coming together as our own family within our team. I could see some advantages for that for sure. Obviously, it comes with challenges at the same time in terms of preparing for that and preparing for the season and the shortened camp and preseason, all those things. But yeah, we'll look at the positives and we'll get prepared to get there and be ready to go when the games start for real.
I've spoken to Sam Kassan about this. I'm really excited for the Devils to travel across the pond and participate in this NHL event, because it grows the game and it makes people more excited for the Devils, and it kind of helps that there's some emotional stakes to it because they're taking on their former head coach in Lindy Ruff, who's behind the bench for the Sabres. It's going to be interesting, and once again, they're going to report to Prague in about 10 days. and the preseason will still be going on, but I think people are going to shift their focus to those games on October 4th and October 5th. And I believe it's going to start in the early afternoon. I don't know what the time zone looks like in Prague. I'll have to look it up. But for the time being, it's going to be an exciting event for New Jersey. All right. Those are some of my main takeaways from training camp. It seems like everyone is in high spirits. Everyone's excited. Everyone's looking forward to the challenge. And I'm definitely no exception, entering year 5 of covering the Devils. Let me know what you guys think. What did you think of Fitzy's, I guess, infamous or famous soundbite, however you want to phrase it, of saying no D heads? And what are just some of your overall thoughts of training camp? And who do you have expectations for? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.